All right, someone can check that. You want to check that out and see if I'm actually projecting. I'm back, and it's COMP305. It's week 5, lesson 5, part 4. And we're still just hanging on to that mail pilot because there's still a couple things I got to show you. I'm just going to turn the lights down while you guys connect. So why am I still doing this mail pilot stuff anyway? Well, last time we got together, we talked about making a UI with mail pilot. And let me just bring up the projects. I'm going to start my Unity off. Start my Unity off. And again, this is here on the Mac. The PC is very similar. So I'm going to go into, for section 1, COMP305 mail pilot demo, section 1. And eventually it'll start off. Okay, so I'm going to load up my scenes. The first scene I had, like from last day when we got together, was this menu scene. So very, very simple. So if I start the menu off, we left off like this. I kind of hover over. I get this little button, and then I click start. I get this, and then I die a bunch of times. Right, with that ugly sound, right? And at the end of the scene, right? Okay, so that's where we were last time. So let me stop this. Again, the play button, the pause button, and the step button, right? See how it steps through? Okay, so yeah, so we had this problem, which was how do I pass data? And we're going to run into this problem again later on. How do I pass data between the scenes without using some kind of file system? How do I do that? So remember that I created in my other scene, in my main scene, I created this thing called high score as a component, right? Or as a game object that was empty. Now, we haven't done anything with this high score yet, but I want to be able to carry forward the high score from one to the next. So I have a problem, right? And the problem is that I don't have a score component to carry into that high score, right? I need to be able to write into the scene somehow, write some kind of high score value in there. And how would I do that? Now, the script that I have right now, if I go to scripts so far, I want to deal with this thing. Here's my high score script. It's empty, right? I really haven't written anything in mono developed, right? In my high score script, I just have a don't destroy on load, which basically keeps the script. It persists this script and the related component as long as I start this off. So obviously, like I said, I may want to move this script somewhere else, right? To move it to another place, but I want to be able to have a public high score component that I access, right? And then I'm able to write to, right? And it'll remember across, and because it's going to persist, it's going to remember across all things here. So there's a couple ways to do this. Remember, and this is the key, guys. We're using C#. We're using C#, right? So let's suppose here that I have in a regular C. I'm doing a regular C# script. My basic way to do this was to hold the object, if you will, as a private variable and create a getter or a setter. Now, to keep it simple, let's suppose that our instance variable is public. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to make our public instance variable. And we're going to call this, high score, right? So it's going to be an integer, right? Because I don't think we can have, we're not going to have a high score that's a float. And we're going to call it high score. So high score. And right now it's going to be, that's all it's going to have, just an integer with a high score. That's it. Now this is actually a high score value, right? And that's what this thing is. It's not a high score label or anything else. If I go back, after I've saved my script, if I go back and look at my high score, I do have a high score that starts off at 0, right? So then, I want to access this script that's called high score, right? How do I access a script from another script, right? Well, it's not so easy, right? How do I access a script from another script and access it, make a reference to that script, and write to it somehow? And that's the challenge that we're going to have in front of us. It's not going to be, because I want to write to that script somehow, right? But this script may or may not be within my scene, right? And I also want to be able to read from my script, right? By making a reference to it somehow, right? Because if I don't make a reference to the script itself when I write to it or whatever, I don't have access to it whatsoever. Okay, so there's a couple things I can do to do this, and I'm just going to talk about this in a second. So what I want to do here is remember that my high score, I got to be very careful what I put in. Here, look, there's high score here, and my object is called high score. I may want to be thinking about changing this to something else, like for example, high score controller or something else. So that way they're not the same. This might be confusing for the compiler. So let's rename our high score component to high score controller or something else, high score script, whatever. We actually have a high score script here anyway, but that's not the point. All right, so there's a high score controller. I want to tag this thing, right? Because I'll be honest with you, that's the main thing that's causing us a headache, right? So I'm going to add a tag, and I'm going to call this high score controller. So I can always go back and find it. Now the tag, even though I added the tag, it's still not tagged until I pull it down from the tag window to here. Now there's different ways of doing this thing, and it's a big long tag name, but don't worry about that right now. Okay, that's the first thing. So I got a tag, right? And I want to access it from my somehow my scoreboard right now keeps track of, right, my score and my lives, right? So if I was to actually look at my scoreboard controller, right? So I want to take a look at this scoreboard controller. My scoreboard itself, it doesn't have a script attached to it, right? There is no script attached to my scoreboard. My scoreboard has positions for these things that spit them out, like they're just labels that write them out. But really everything that goes on in our game right now, the way we've written it, this should be written probably differently, is inside of our player collider, right? So here's our player collider, which may mean we need to kill this thing. Okay, so I'm gonna die, right? And at the end of my game, here it is. If this lives is less than or equal to 0, then I end the game. That's what I'm doing here, right? But I want to, before I do this, I want to do two things. I want to send my score to my high score. That's what I want to do, right? Okay. Let's do a simple test. I want to create a high score that's something that I can access. It doesn't have to be public in this case because I don't need to share it with the inspector. So it could be private. So let's do that. So let's do a couple things. So I want to make a access, if you will, to this new property called high score. Okay, so private, it's going to be an int, and I need to store it here. High score. Here's my high score. Right now I'm going to set it to 0. Okay, so it's private integer. I need to make a reference to this high score, right? Somehow, this high score, which is a private variable, right? I need to make a reference to it on start. And this is where it gets hairy when I start writing this stuff down. So just be careful when I start doing it. Don't be alarmed, right? So I'm going to say this dot underscore scoreboard, or high score, there it is. Is equal to, I need to make a reference to it, right? And it's got to be game object, right? And then dot find with tag. And it's going to be called the name of the game object, which is high score controller. That's what the game object is called, high score controller, right? Let's see if I've done this correctly. And then, so game object, find with tag, high score, I'm going to call it the high score controller. Dot get component. I'm going to get the component of the high score controller. So get component, which is normally what I would normally do. This is the big part here. And in there, instead of me having the name in angle brackets like this, I can also put it in by calling the actual component name itself, which in my case is called high score script, if I'm not wrong. So capital high score script, because that high score script is the name of the script. I'm getting an access. I'm accessing that script itself, right? So that's what this high score is, right? So I'm getting a name of the script, and I'm casting it as the high score controller. As here's the word one, high score controller. Hold on a second. As high score script. Sorry, a high score script. That's fine. So I'm going to make it as a script. Ooh. So what am I doing here? When I do this, right? When I make a, I make it as a component. So this scoreboard itself, what I want to do is, after I've created a relation to it or a reference, I want to be able to access it. So how would I do that? Because my scoreboard itself really is the scoreboard controller itself. And so if I access the scoreboard controller, then I have a score, right? So maybe this high score isn't really what I want to call it. It's really the high score script, if you will, or the high score controller, something like that. And maybe the high score panel or high score container or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's the high score, this high score, and then it's high score, right? So it's got to be something that makes sense. So let's, and again, if you notice, this high score is an integer, but now I'm casting this high score as some kind of script, right? Because it can't be the way I have it. So let's redo this a little bit. So I'm going to make a private. Up here, I'm going to make a private component again, and it's going to be of type high score. If I start writing high score, the only one that's available is high score script. And I'm going to call it high score script. So high score script, just so that we have that as a reference with a lowercase h, right? And this is what I want, this underscore, I'm making an underscore high score script. This dot underscore high score script then, right, is equal to this script that's in the high score controller. The high score script that's in the high score controller, which I've casted as a high score script. Right? If I don't do this, I won't have access. Right? Okay, cool. I don't need this then. Nice to have a value, but I'm just going to modify the value that's in there. All right, there we go. How do I modify that? Well, when I go down, let's just check this out. I'm going to say this. So before I die, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this dot underscore high score script, when you want to create it, dot, right? And then I should be able to access my high score. There it is, right? Because that's part of the script itself. The high score field, right, is equal to this dot underscore score. Whew. Right, so I'm making a copy. That's what this does. Copy high score or score to high score. That's what I'm doing. So I'm making a copy. All right. Just so we know what it is, so we can prove that it's working, right? This high score itself, and before it fails, because it's going to fail the way I have it, right? What I want to do is in my high score itself, high score script, you can get the door for him. In my high score script, what I want to do is I want to, in my start function, when this thing is instantiated or on update, let's say on update, every frame, I want to show what my high score is, just in case we know what it is. So let's try this out. So I'll say every frame I want to know, so I'm going to go debug.log just as a test, debug.log, and then I'll put in something like our high score, which is this dot high score. All right, so that's all I need to put in here. Okay, and we'll go back and I'll show you this all again in a second. All right, so let's run this thing from the first level. So I'm going to go back to my first scene. I'm going to go back to scenes, and I'm going to go back to menu, and we'll definitely save the scene. And when I'm in menu, I'm going to start. Okay, so let's see how this goes. So here I am. Let's see what I see in my console. Do I see anything in my console? Because, well, no, because my high score controller isn't available in my menu yet. And we'll move it there, by the way. But this isn't here, right? We have this problem before. So let's try this again. So I'm playing, I start. Now, let's pause And let's see what I'm getting in my console. Well, I'm getting a 0 because there is no high score right now, right? Okay, so let's unpause and see if I go to here and
yay,
move on.
yay,
And go over here.
yay.
And then die. Here's my high score controller. What does my high score say? 300. So it works. I've copied everything in there. It's 300. All right. This is the big test. I want to restart the game. This is where it gets hairy, right? Let's go back to game, and I want to restart. Remember, there's only one high score controller. We know when I restart this game, there's going to be another one. What's going to happen now? Let's restart. All right, and I got 100. 200. I had 300 before. 300. 400. Okay, that's good enough. Let's stop. 400, right? So at 400, let's see what my console says. 400. But look, it's 400 and then zeros. A bunch of zeros and 400. Why? I'm getting zeros because it doesn't know what the hell I want, right? I'm getting, like, there's two high score controllers. I don't know which one I'm accessing because they both have the exact same name and tag. So it's going to get the first one. The second one is going to be 0 because I'm not accessing that one. I'm accessing the second one. So I know it works. I'm able to pass the value, right? But right now it's 0. So the answer is, and this is the quick answer, I can't put this script, like I said before, inside my main game. Now that I have access to it because I'm calling it by tag, I can put it anywhere, any scene I want, because it's going to persist throughout my whole game. So I might as well put it in my mail pilot, my menu, because I'm never going to get back there, right? As soon as I exit the game, at least, let me just tell you this, I'm not going to get back there in this iteration of mail pilot, right? Because my mail pilot game, and this is one of the ways we can do this without saving it to file or something like that, or some online server, which we will handle in Professor Narendra's class in game programming 2, when we start handling things like file saving and all this other stuff. All right, so let's make this thing work and do a quick fix so it works. So how do I do that? I'm going to go back into my main menu, or my main game, and I have this high score controller, right? I can't really copy it here, but let's just try it. I'm going to copy the high score controller. Here's my copy. And I'm going to go back into my menu and see if I can paste. And the beautiful thing about Unity is it allows me to do that. So here's my high score controller. Now my high score controller, even though I copied and pasted, has access to my script automatically. So this is a great way of pasting one object from one scene to the next. It saves a lot of time, guys, right? As opposed to copying the whole scene, you can only paste one scene. So this is another thing. I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone telling you this stuff, because this is another way. If you were going to copy one scene to the next scene, this is a good way of doing that. All right, cool. We got this thing going on. Let us try a couple of other things here. Okay, and
Just, yeah, you mean, can I still do the quiz?
you can. Give me 1 second while I pause. Well, let you do it. It only takes half an hour. All right, so let's take a look at this high score controller thing for a second. It's in my main scene now, or my menu. I need to take it out of main. So let's save my scene. Going into main. There's in main now, and let's remove it from my main scene. So I'm just going to remove it from here. Delete. Okay, because it's in my menu scene, I'm going to go back to menu scene while I save this scene. I still have my high score controller here, but it persists. So that way I should have it in every scene anyway. Let's take a look. So I'm going to go play. Here's my high score controller. I can see that it's there. I'm going to go into the start. It's still there, right? Let's get some scoring happening, right?
Yay.
Right. I got 200 points, and the die saved 300 points,
Yay.
400 points. Oh boy.
Yay.
Hold
Yay.
on. Let's get there.
Yay.
One more time.
Yay.
Okay, I'm almost there.
Yay.
I swear. So I got 1,000 points, right? Let's see what I got in the console. 1,000 points. And we're looking at the last scene. This is good, right? I'm still able to persist this 1,000 points because my high score object, high score controller is still there. Now if I go back, so I go back to my game and I restart, there's only still one high score controller because I'm not really ever going to destroy it right? I'm not going to recreate it. The only time it gets recreated in my scene, right? The only place is when I go to back to my menu. Let's go to 1100 points. Okay, I got 1100 points now. Go back to my console and I see 1100 points nicely there. So I have a way of transferring my points, my data. I'm moving my data from one place to the other. Hey, so is there anything you can think of? Let's be smart here, guys. Right? I have a game object. Remember, I can do whatever I want to do. This is C#. I have so much control over my environment. It's not funny. We forget sometimes what we can do, right? So I've got my high score controller here, right? And I'm making it, remember, anytime I physically have something in there starting off, it still gets instantiated here. What can I do instead of instantiating my high score controller, right? Because high score controller, I got a menu controller, and do I really need my high score controller in here? Is another way that I can do this without using it? And I still got my scripts, what can I do? Well, in my mind, I'm thinking I can probably attach my script to my menu controller, right? Because who cares, right? It's just I'm just separating concerns right now. So I've got two different things here, right? Which means I have to do a bit of a rewrite in my collider, right? That's one thing I could do. Here's another one. What if I only instantiate my high score controller once, which I do now, but if I ever come back here and if I detect if I'm back to this particular scene somehow, can I not reset my high score or remove any chance of having a new controller? Is that possible by not allowing a new high score? Because there's some games that allow you to exit and go back to main menu, right? That would stop me from doing what I'm doing here, right? Because I'm making it persist, right, across scenes, and it's a problem. And someone asked also, can I have a background scene that runs parallel? Like instead of me, stopping one scene and moving on to the next scene, can I do that? And yes, you can. You can have more than scene running at the same time, but it takes a bit of load on your machine. So that's another way you can do it. So you don't actually kill your scene ever. You just have it running, and then so you have it in the background the whole time, right? So there's different methodologies, and we're going to handle them when we get to we're going to start handling when we get to this 2D platformer thing we're doing. So this is definitely one way. Let's finish it off now. If we have a way of propagating our data, and I'm going to go back to my scripts, and I'm going to go to my high score script here for a second. I'm going to get rid of this debug.log because it bugs me, right? And what I need to do is I want to read, right, into my log. I want to read from this script somehow, right? So I need to make another reference to this crazy script. How do I do that? Well, I need to do that. Save it. I'm going to go back to my my last scene, my game over scene. Here's my game over scene. And in my game over scene, I only have my canvas, and I have my game over label. Let's copy this thing. So copy, and I'm going to paste. Right. You can also duplicate or paste. So here's my game over label. I'm going to rename this thing. So from game over label, it's going to be called the high score label. Here's my high score label. I have to kind of redo the tag on it as well. That was one use of a good use of tag. I'm going to put it in my canvas, right, so that it's it kind of shows my high score label here as well. Now my high score label says game over, and it's layered on top of this one because it's in exactly the same position. So let us do a couple things. One is I want to call this high score. Take a look what's happening, right? High score, and it's really big. Right? Or maybe just call this score. How about score? Right? It's really big. I don't think font size of 60 makes sense. I might go to font size of 40 again. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I definitely want to move this down. So I'm going to kind of select this thing. So I'm going to go to my high score. And in my scene, I'm going to select it to move it into play. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 60 was pretty good. I'm going to check this out. All right. But I maybe need to adjust my layout a little bit just to move it down. Move this one up just a touch. Give myself a little bit of room to put my high score and my buttons in there. And if I look at my score itself, it says score. And I want to change this label, this score label, if you will. By first of all, I got to make a new tag. So I'm going to add a new tag, and we're going to call this high score label. High score label. There we go. All right, and we're going to go back to our high score and assign it that high score label. So it's a little different than we had before. That's different. There we go. High score label. Save. And after this, I'll upload everything to GitHub, so you have all my code. Okay, so there's my game over, my score. I want to pass this information somehow, and I don't have any container to do this. I have a game over controller. That's one place I can probably do it. And I have other things in here, but I have my game over panel, right? My game over panel. So I want to access my game over panel, right? This game over panel, because it has, you know, these items. I don't have a script here, but I want to access my game over panel somehow, right? That's a component, a game object, and I'm going to change my game over panel's object, my score, just like I did the other one. Okay, so game over panel. Game over controller can do it as well. So let's recall what I did here. I'm going to save my scene. Let's recall what I did when I got my score in the main game. So I've got my main game. Here's my scoreboard. Right, my scoreboard does not have. Let me show you what I did here, just to recall. Right, my scoreboard and my canvas does not have a script component attached to it. I have a script component attached right now, separate. Into another component that I have under my player called Player Collider. If you go to Player Collider, scripts, not sprites, scripts, Player Collider, here it is. My Player Collider, I have some public values, a score label and a lives label. It's public values here. And I also have a, that's interesting, right? And I have a high score script that I made. This is what I need to look at here. I have an audio source and so on. And I'm able to, with my score label dot text, I want to update my score label dot text by adding in my score, right? And now where am I getting this score, and this lives from? Well, it started off at 0 and 5, and I'm getting the values from there and populating them onto my label. So there's two pieces to it: the label and the value, right? Label and the value. Okay. So let's get into my, do the same thing with my, my last scene. So let's go back. So I'm going to go back to my scenes, game over. And what I want to do in my game over controller or my game over panel, one of the two, let's go game over controller, right? And we already have a scene in there called game over controller, right? So, or, sorry, a script. So let's go into my scripts. And I want to go into my game over controller script by double clicking. And if you notice, it does, oh, that's my game controller, sorry. It's my game over controller, I said. All it does is it loads a level right now. But let's make a public variable. So public, remember, it allows us to access the inspector. So public instance variables. And inside my inspector, I'm going to make a public, and we're going to call it high score, right? So high score label. High score label, right? Now, what type is my high score label, right? It's going to be a type of text. And remember what I did last time. I went to, in order for me to get that, I've got to go to using Unity Engine, right? Unity Engine.ui. I need to put that in there, or else I can't access it. Here's my UI, right? And what I want to make this is text, right? Because that's what it is. It's a text object, right? If I don't do this, there's no, it doesn't know what high score label is, right? Okay, so now that I know what high score label is, I need to make a connection. I need to make a reference to it in the inspector. So here's my game over controller, and I'm going to go, if you notice, under my game over controller script, this is where it is right now. I need to make a connection to my game over panel somehow. And inside my panel, I have a game over label and a high score label, right? This high score label has got to be the one that I kind of connect. There we are. So now I've got a connection between my high score label, which is in my game over panel, and my game over controller script. There it is. Okay, cool. This is good. Now, I also need in my game over controller, I need the same script that I had in my player collider, which is this script right here. I need to make a reference to my high score script, this one. So I take this piece and put this over here, right? So this is these are my public and these are my private distance variables. We'll just make it a little different this time. And I'll paste it in there. So a high score, it's a reference to my high score script. I'm going to need to access that again. Right, here it is. So I updated it in Player Collider, and now I'm going to read it in Game Over Controller, right? And then back to Player Collider, I need to do the same thing. I need to make a reference to this thing in my start. So I'm going to grab the exact same line of code, right? Again, you can cut this down by making an alias and so on, or some kind of global class, but we're not going to do that right now. Just to keep it simple so we don't confuse everybody. All right, so there it is. This high score script is actually a script just like I had in there from Player Collider. I just copied it from here to there, right? So I've got access to my high score script, and now what I want to do is I want to say the when I on update or on start, right? So when this game starts, I want to pass this information from a high score label is going to equal to .text is going to equal to the high score script, right? Dot high score. And see how this goes. So let's say this is going to be, so it's going to be this dot high score label dot text, right? Very simple, is equal to this dot underscore high score script dot high score, right? So now this will pass the high score value into the text label as text. Now remember, this high score value is an integer, right? And this is expecting a string. So I need to also put the string piece, which is score. So let's try this out. So score, and then plus, I want to concatenate the integer with the string to produce that final score value. Make sense? Let's check this out. All right, so let's see if it all works. I'm linking it together. I'm going to go back. I'm going to save my scene. I'm going to go back to my previous scenes in my menu, start the game, right? And let's press start. Okay, I get some points. I died a couple times already. I died one time already. Twice. I'm taking too many risks. This is not a game of risk. Oh, I score 500, right? That's what it ends up. Now, if I go back, it's the test. I go back, you have a point, another point, another point, but it's only 300, right? Scores 300. So it passes my score, but not, it's my high score. It's not the high score. It doesn't remember high scores because of the way I overwrite it, right? How do I do that? Well, remember, if I want it to be the high score, so here's my score, and what the high score is, so your score and high score, how do I do that? I could pass another value. Right now it's the score, like as in your final score. Instead of high score, it's the final score. And again, I would compare it. I would say I've got my score, my final score, as well as my high score, and I can compare my final score to my high score. And if my final score is greater than or equal to my high score, I can, or greater than, I would assign it. Otherwise, I keep my high score the way it is. It's very easy in terms of our way. But really, in a nutshell, we've kind of completed everything we want to do with our 2D shooter game now. We've got, except we've extended it a little bit more. We've added a UI. We've added our high score component. We moved from one scene to the next, and we've talked about how to propagate data, at least in one way, from one scene to the next. It's not the only way, by the way. Let's take a pause here, and then I'll have one person who didn't do their test start their test, and then I'll get right into starting off our platformer project.